It has been a long time since I've gotten to do a character dive, and even longer since I've made any videos that had to touch on Dawn of the Clans, so I was more than happy to see my patrons pick Tall Shadow as the next character for me to cover. Admittedly though, her video will have to be different than most of my character dives. First, because she is a relatively major and consistent character. She becomes Shadow Star, the first leader of ShadowClan, and even has her own novella, which we'll have to cover here. Second, because as much as it is being talked about more now than it was a few years ago, Dawn of the Clans is still much less well known than any other Warriors arc, due to being in a completely different time period. A lot of you who do know Dawn of the Clans will likely know it, in part or entirely, through secondhand accounts on your social media of choice, and as a result may come in with very specific ideas and feelings. Just to be clear out of the gate, I won't be touching on Clear Sky, Grey Wing, or the various conflicts off of them in this video. Tall Shadow's a good character, and she deserves some discussion apart from the, now controversial, protagonists of the arc.
Of course, would you expect anything less?
Ah, yes. Welcome to Sunny Void, everyone. Sorry, are you floating?
It won't touch water.
Right, that probably would, quench your flames. Anyway, as a ShadowClan cat herself, Sunny Void here has some even stronger feelings than I do for the clan's founder, so I told her she could sit in while I record this episode. Did you want to come and join me up here?
That's your thing.
Okay, suit yourself. With that out of the way, let's dive into what Tall Shadow's character actually is, and of course, we have to start with Secrets of the Clans. What, you thought we'd start with Dawn of the Clans? That whole arc was inspired by tiny excerpts from the field guides, both battles and secrets, and I would never miss an opportunity to discuss the field guides. What we learned of Shadowstar here is that she was a black cat with green eyes, something that never changed, that she was a strategist, fiercely independent to the point of even distrusting her own clanmates, and bold in battle. As with all leaders, she is noted to be a founder of the clans who worked with the other leaders to develop the warrior code, but in her case she apparently complained about it for the rest of her life. She was also, interestingly, the first of the leaders to die, losing her last life in a battle she started with the other clans. This paints a picture of Shadowstar being the least leader-like of the founding leaders, being reckless, independent, not caring much about the clan she led or the code that bound the clans together. It lines up well with how ShadowClan is thought of in the modern day, but as Secrets of the Clans itself admits, these are stories told and retold through the generations, and the truth might be different than what is presented. In that case, what is the truth? What does Dawn of the Clans have to say about her? Right off the bat, in the Sun Trail, Tall Shadow is already being characterized as a future leader. She is the second cat to join the journey to the new home, and is consistently curious and excited about the possibilities a new territory could bring. Another cat also mentions that she has always been good at creeping around, a not-so-subtle note that lets the reader know which clan she will lead. Throughout the first half of the book, she and Clear Sky work as a pair of pseudo-leaders under Shaded Moss, either as individuals or together. And while Tall Shadow sticks close to her brother, Moon Shadow, she stands out distinctly from the crowd. She is consistently characterized as quiet but eloquent, firm and sometimes prickly, extremely compassionate and determined, sometimes to the point of stubbornness. A strong and likable character. Once Shaded Moss passes away, Tall Shadow takes up an even more explicit leadership role over the group from the mountains, and she implies, when questioned, that Shaded Moss named her his successor, but she never makes that explicit or explains further. This introduces her other defining trait, being introverted and guarded. We'll come back to this after some further context. Soon into their arrival on the moors, the mountain cats meet Wind and Gorse, and instantly, Tall Shadow considered them and other non-mountain cats to be potential dangers, firmly standing up to them and demanding her group avoid hunting alone so they could protect each other from the rogues. It's clear even this early on that Tall Shadow puts a distinct line between her cats and everyone else. This is shaken a little when Clear Sky and Moon Shadow lead a portion of her group to go and live in the forest instead, away from them. But she wishes them well without protest and promises they can come back whenever they want. A promise she kept when she immediately invited Jagged Peak back and, much later, Turtletail as well, despite some fierce protests from her own cats. As her cats begin growing closer to Wind and Gorse, she allows them to visit, clearly disliking the idea but giving them the benefit of the doubt. As a leader, she consistently faces new situations that others are excited about with marked wariness, but tries not to override others' decisions, allows discussions to be had before making any big steps, and seeks counsel with some of her most trusted allies before announcing things publicly. For instance, she asks Greywing for advice on whether or not to let Wind and Gorse stay. In this moment, she even expresses some insecurity that Shaded Moss would have known what to do in a way that she does not. Before I move on to her journey in Thunder Rising, I want to take stock of what we learned about Tall Shadow so far, because it is critical in understanding the most moving parts of her character. Tall Shadow is a very guarded cat, quiet, and someone who actively puts up a front to look more confident and professional than she often feels. Because of that, and because we don't have a perspective in her head, gaining full insight into her character can take some extra work. First of all, it would seem that Moonshadow was one of the only cats she was truly close to, enough to not put up a front for him. And perhaps Shaded Moss counted in this category too, as a good friend. Tall Shadow doesn't expound about her friendships ever, but from the tidbits we have, it seems like a good guess. Now Shaded Moss is dead, Moonshadow is over in the forest, having left her behind, and she is left with the group of cats from the mountains that she must take care of no matter what. Tall Shadow has a lot of responsibility on her shoulders, some she chose for herself and some given to her, and has lost the cats she felt comfortable sharing her feelings with. It seems to be her default state at this point to appear professional, diplomatic, and firm in her orders, while also doing her absolute best to keep her cats safe and welcomed with the compassion and caution that they sometimes skip over. She seems to be very selfless at this point, but also on a rocky slope mentally. Losing your connections while putting even more weight on yourself doesn't tend to go well. At least, for a single moment, she seems to relent to relying on Greywing. With how compassionate and sensitive he, too, can be, I'm sure he'll be able to take some of the pressure off. Or, not. So in Thunder Rising, Tall Shadow makes a few different choices that lead cats to start questioning her. First, she lets Turtletail back in without question, despite some cats thinking she betrayed them by becoming a kitty pet during the hardest season of the year. Second, when Jagged Peak is injured, she encourages him to rest rather than helping in a mission, which discourages him morally. Third, she asks for time to decide whether to let Wind and Gorse stay permanently rather than accepting them in immediately. All three of these decisions are well grounded in her character from the previous book. She sees her group of mountain cats as friends and family that must be protected, and that didn't stop for Turtletail when she became a kitty pet temporarily. She is very cautious and doesn't want her cats to follow their reckless tendencies. So, even though it hurt his pride, she didn't want Jagged Peak to risk hurting himself further while he was healing. Her caution and sense of what her group is also causes her to be wary towards cats not from the mountains, and she liked having time to herself to think and go to individual cats in confidence to make decisions. So, of course, she wouldn't accept Wind and Gorse in immediately. I'd like to note that I'm not taking a personal stance on which, if any, of these decisions were right or wrong, but they are in her character and come from understandable places. However, all of these decisions also start making cats disagree with her more publicly, or, in some cases, actively question her place as leader, in particular supporting that Greywing the hero become leader instead. Tall Shadow holds her emotions in as best she can, but is furious at the suggestion that she doesn't care about her cats. She gets very upset and disappears, off on her own, and yet, that same night, she returns to her efficient, professional organization and leadership as if nothing happened. And just about every day, she keeps constantly vigilant, sitting on what becomes known as her rock to keep watch over the camp. Now her own cats are turning on her, have somehow come away with the idea that she doesn't care about them when she might care more than everyone, and she has lost all her friendships. The only cat she had begun to confide in, Greywing, has been forced into being her rival for leadership, and Wind, despite not even joining yet, has been making moves towards leadership as well. I can only imagine how trapped and tumultuous Tall Shadow feels at this point. And, to top off everything, Moonshadow is injured and then dies in a fire in Clear Sky's territory. Unable to keep up the act she had when she has to care for her brother, Tall Shadow willingly abdicates to Greywing, trying her best to gracefully thank everyone for their support, even though many of these cats have been actively critical of her for a while. Even after giving up leadership, she watches over Greywing, keeps vigilant watch over camp, and tries to advise Greywing when he reaches out to her, without undermining his authority, or even Windrunner's. She remains a cautious, compassionate, guarded voice of reason, and even comes around to inviting Windrunner and Gorsford to stay permanently by the end of the book. Now, I love this character arc. I love how intentionally her character was written and how her consistent traits never really went away, but showed themselves differently and were responded to differently in new situations. What I do wish is that we could see this story from her perspective to know exactly what's happening in her head, to confirm many of the things I can only declare through implication, and most of all, to show how she fares afterwards. Tall Shadow has effectively lost all her friends, and her guarded nature and critical group have made it difficult to form new relationships. So how does she go on? Who does she share her feelings with, or how does she deal with not being able to share them at all? How does she try to adjust to using her own skills in the new political climate they find themselves in? Admittedly, for the rest of the arc, aside from falling in love with the marshland when they find it, she does not get much development. She most often stays as a firm, cautious, level-headed leader in each situation, and is often the one to suggest and lead the group, or groups, in big decisions. She gets involved whenever possible in any conflict affecting them all, but on a character level, she doesn't get much more exploration, and seems to keep most of her guard up for the rest of the arc. Even the arrival of Moonshadow's son, Sunshadow, doesn't do much, as neither he nor she get much time to see this relationship on the page, and Sunshadow isn't actually characterized much at all. This lack of focus continues and grows as the arc nears its end, and even goes into the supplemental material. In Mothflight's vision, Thunderstar's echo, and even the recent Riverstar's home, she barely exists as more than one of the leaders, and nothing is suggested about her character. A short conversation with Sunshadow in Mothflight's book even reveals that Sunshadow didn't connect with Tall Shadow, despite being kin, because she was thoroughly a forest cat by the time they met, and he didn't have many cats around who could understand yearning for the mountains. It's entirely possible, then, that even with her deputy, Tall Shadow had difficulty connecting on a more personal level. So, having to skip past all of that, we are left with one last piece of her story to cover, the novella where we finally get a glimpse into her head, right at the end. Shadowstar's life is a short story about the very end of her life, when she's already been living as ShadowClan's leader for seasons, so there's only so much development it can contain. But even here, there are several things I found noteworthy, and while I do not like the book at large for how it warps several characters in order to get the conflict to work, I'm actually happy with how Shadowstar herself was presented. She has made amends with Clear Sky and considers him an old friend, and in general has a persistent preference for all of the former mountain cats that remains to this day. She even loves and forgives Quickwater, who tried to kill her twice and successfully killed Sunshadow. Most of what she likes about Sunshadow is his connection to her brother, a sign of their lack of connection even through their connection. And a lot of her actions and thoughts in this book continue her cautious, selfless, guarded characterization from Dawn of the Clans. Her first thoughts in several dangerous situations are about how others will survive. She blames herself for not saving her deputy while she was dying herself, and while she is suspicious of her attacker, she keeps the suspicion and her number of lives almost entirely to herself in order to protect her clan. She acts as the mediator between clan leaders multiple times, takes time on important choices, and steps in with her trademark firm, professional leadership when her clanmates begin to fight over who should be deputy. Pebbleheart seems to be the only one she confesses her feelings and situation to, and even then, this is the first time she has done so in her life. That said, I love what he is able to provide in those breathing techniques. Finally, at her death, she is happy just to know that ShadowClan will outlast her. The only thing that seems even slightly off is that she has lost 8 lives already, considering how careful we know she is, but all of them seem to have been just as unavoidable or selfless deeds as I would expect, and only one was even lost in a fight to a cat, a rogue. It seems to contradict the Secrets of the Clan excerpt on her, but knowing how misunderstood and guarded Tall Shadow was in her time, I'm not surprised that Shadowstar's image was distorted by the time the clans told those stories.
At least, not me. I still love her.
I know you do, but clearly not every cat felt that way. You know how they talked about ShadowClan back when Firestar was alive.
Well, he was a mouse brain.
Yeah, okay. Looking at all of this, and knowing how much I really do love Tall Shadow, she's honestly one of my favorite parts of Dawn of the Clans, and one of the best examples of how well they were able to produce consistent and complex characters in their early cast. I think I ended up learning something about my personal tastes. Not exclusively, but I am often gripped by characters who are unresolved. They have a very clear and complex introduction, some big event that could shift or did shift their character, and the story failed to follow through on that or delve in enough to let us see what changed. At the end of Tall Shadow, or Shadowstar's story, I don't know if she ever got the chance to fully be happy in the way I would hope for her. She did a lot of good, made a massive impact on all the clans, and had an amazing amount of drive, intellect, and self-control that made her a remarkable leader. But I don't know that she ever got a chance to have a friend or let anyone fully enter her heart. It's part of the reason that she's so easily headcanoned into an asexual and aromantic character, a theory I fully support.
Asexual, Tall Shadow, forever.
But even for an asero person, maybe especially for an asero person, I would hope it's possible for them to connect with others anyway, as friends. Combining that with the fact that she is depicted as reckless, aggressive, and both guarded and private to a fault in Secrets of the Clans, which is canonically how the stories are told in a modern perspective, and it looks like all of her strengths were only seen by her detractors as flaws, and that, for all the good she did, few to no cats ever told stories of who Tall Shadow was behind her fronted persona. It makes her come across as a very tragic character in the end, though not in the same way that someone like Cinderpelt, Crooked Star, or Snowkit were tragic. Rather than being written to be doomed in-universe, having several compounding horrible life events, or only being invented to die thanks to the authors, Tall Shadow was tragic because she was a good person with good qualities who did good things. Despite that, she could have been much happier if both she and the writers spent more time with her, or especially gave her a point of view in the arc in which to flourish, examine herself, and grow. But hey, that's why she's so engaging to me, because now I can think of how her tale might have grown if it had been allowed to.
Are you writing that Sunnyfall, like with jaws of ours?
Paws of stars, and, well, for Tall Shadow, it won't be me. But there's so few fan stories about Dawn of the Clans compared to other arcs that I'm sure it would be an available topic if any of you want to cover it. Hint, hint. Thank you for watching, and always remember that as much as you do for others, you deserve to feel happy too. Share your feelings, share yourself, and you may find you come out better for it.